All right, let's get started. So again, welcome to the UMassSafe CV-STAC webinar series. The series is on innovative initiatives in CDL compliance and safety. It's really great to have you here today. My name's Robin Reisman. I'm the director of UMassSafe. I want to give a special thank you to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, who has funded this project, and the CV-STAC Technical Assistance website, as well as the webinar series. This is the 6th in a 9-part series, and all of the webinars that have occurred so far are posted on the CV-STAC website. So if you've missed one and you're interested in hearing it, feel free to go there. Or if you know of somebody else that had wanted to participate and wasn't able to, have them go to, excuse me, have them go to cvstac.umasssafe.org. Today we have with us Bob Rowland. He is the CDL coordinator with the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles. He's presenting on autonomous vehicles and CDL, and specifically talking about legislative and regulatory implications. As part of the AAMVA autonomous working group, research is being done with AAMVA jurisdictions and law enforcement and federal entities and other stakeholders to organize and share information. And he has been actively involved in that and will be sharing that with us. This webinar will cover, as I said, the legislative and regulatory implications of autonomous vehicles as they're being discussed in that working group. After the presentation, there'll be plenty of time for discussion. You can either type questions in the chat box, or when Bob's done, you can unmute yourself and ask the questions. What will make this webinar the most interesting is the dialogue and the questions that you ask, so we encourage you to ask those. Before we start, let me just tell you a little bit about Bob. Bob Rowland serves as the lead on commercial driver licensing activity for the Registry of Motor Vehicles here in Massachusetts, by analyzing and reviewing state and federal legislation for commercial drivers. Bob also coordinates compliance efforts with Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration that require regulatory or legislative changes. He actively seeks, applies, and monitors federal grant opportunities for the Registry of Motor Vehicles. And he also serves as the business lead on IT projects that involve compliance in regards to SIDLess programs. He's been at the registry since 2004, working in many different capacities, the most recent being as the CDL coordinator. We're really happy to have him here. So without further ado, here's Bob Rowland.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate that. So we're going to talk a little bit about autonomous vehicles and how they relate to CDL. It's a fascinating topic, and the technology just advances in leaps and bounds. So as we have here, there's some levels that have been adopted by the Society of Automotive Engineers. And if you can see, level 0 is no automation at all. Level 1 would be some driver assistance. And then level 2 is a partial automation. 3 is conditional, and then 4 and 5. 4 is high automation, and level 5 would be full automation. And this standard has been adopted by the industry. So in vehicles today, there could be the human driver that does everything, and then some automated systems on most of the vehicles that come off the line today would have cruise control, auto high beams, blind spot monitoring, lane departure, and then forward collision warning. And you'll see these terms talked about. So lane departure warning is basically a system that warns the driver if they start to drift out of the lanes, unless there is a turn signal on in that direction. So the idea obviously is to minimize collisions that's caused by human error, and I believe it's about 94% of collisions are caused by human error. And an automated system on the vehicle can actually conduct some parts of the driving task while the human continues to monitor the driving environment and performs the rest of the driving tasks. And some of these could be automated braking, adaptive cruise control, and then lane centering. So then the emergency braking, automated emergency braking is another feature. So adaptive cruise control can increase or decrease the vehicle speed to maintain a following distance that is set. And advanced versions can even slow and stop the vehicle in traffic jams and then accelerate. It may work with lane centering capabilities. And in levels 3 through 5, there's testing and development today, and it's called HAVs, but it actually is not called HAVs anymore. That the terminology has changed in the last couple of months, that we're calling them automated driving systems, and you'll see that throughout the rest of the presentation. So it is interchangeable, but NHTSA prefers the automated driving system. And the system can both actually conduct some parts of the driving task and monitor the driving environment in some instances. But the human driver must be ready to take back control when the automated system requests. And in high automation, the system can conduct the driving task and monitor the driving environment. And the human doesn't have to take back control, but the automated system can only operate in certain environments and under certain conditions. And then level 5 is full automation. The automated system performs all the driving tasks under all conditions that a driver could perform. Now, level 4 and 5 vehicles may be completely driverless and have no driver controls, such as brakes or steering wheels. And this is interesting because a lot of state standards for inspections may have to be looked at, because vehicles in our state laws are described as having steering wheels and brakes and pedals. And so now if these vehicles do not have those features, things will need to be looked at. And level 4 and 5 may be completely driverless and may also have driver controls, such as brakes and steering wheels, where they're interchangeable. And here's some of the technologies that are being used. LiDAR, which is laser illuminating detection, and then radar, which allows the car to avoid impact by sending signals. The high-powered cameras mounted to the exterior. Sonar, GPS, which we're all familiar with, and then sophisticated software. And these are not brand new technology. LiDAR is actually the one that most people are not familiar with, and it's been around for quite a while. It uses an illuminating target and then sends a pulse, and it's measured and then mapped by wavelengths. And it's actually used quite a bit in seismic maps and geographical applications. So some of this technology has been around for a while. It's just a matter of pulling it all together and using it for commercial vehicles or regular cars. So I'm part of AAMVA's autonomous working group. And there's 3 subgroups that are focusing on these issues. And there's the driver subgroup, which looks at the education, the testing, and the licensing. And then the vehicle subgroup, which looks at permits, registration, and title. And then law enforcement, which has their own concerns and challenges as far as autonomous vehicles. And the guiding principles of our group, we're looking to facilitate a consistent and balanced oversight approach by motor vehicle administrators to avoid inconsistent regulatory practices, and supporting the research and development of technology, which has the potential to improve traffic safety while providing mobility options for underserved populations, and supporting the safe testing and deployment of automated driving systems, and confirming the roles and responsibilities of jurisdictions in the federal government. So a document was produced by the working group, and it's jurisdictional guidelines for safe testing and deployment of highly automated vehicles. And basically the purpose was to provide voluntary recommended guidelines that regard motor vehicle administration and law enforcement for the safe testing and deployment of driver systems. And it was produced in May of 2018, and it is available on the AAMVA website. It really is a good document. It's being constantly looked at and reviewed to make changes as technology changes. And we've got quite a bit of input. Excuse me, we've got quite a bit of input. We have 22 members that are from all jurisdictions. We have 3 people from the Canadian provinces, and as well as support from Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So it's a very diverse group, and there's a lot of input. We meet every couple of weeks, and we've had a few face-to-face meetings, and a lot of good work is really being done. So one of the commercial applications that's very interesting in automated vehicles is platooning. And platooning allows trucks to follow each other closely, and they're connected electronically. And what this does is it reduces drag, and it creates them to be more fuel efficient. Now, several companies have been researching and developing platooning plans for a very long time. Technologies are being used, and they include the lane departure, adaptive cruise control, and as well as the collision warning systems that we spoke of earlier. So some of the topics that are being discussed that will definitely need more research in regards to autonomous vehicles is one such as remote operator. So we see a remote operator as basically somebody who's operating the vehicle but might not be in the vehicle. And some of those things that we look at are situations that say, you know, this is the same technology that's been used by NASA and the military for years. And it could be a possible solution to when autonomous vehicles are not working correctly, or they seem to be confused. And autonomous vehicles can be confused sometimes around work zones, when the infrastructure is poor, and certainly in some types of weather conditions. There's a high interest in California and Nevada in regards to autonomous, and I'm sure the weather plays a big part of it. They have a tendency to stay out of Massachusetts, basically because of snow and ice and black ice. And the infrastructure is a little different here, where we have everything from asphalt to cow paths. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to further research that topic. And then licensing and endorsements and restrictions. If you're not driving the vehicle or you're not operating the vehicle, is a license necessary? And are endorsements necessary? If it's autonomous and you're directing this vehicle from another location or from a different vehicle, do you need to have these endorsements? Are there other restrictions that need to be in place? And these are things that will be worked out with Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, because these all need to be done at the federal level. Now, one of the other topics that's interesting is the driver shortage. So we know that there's a driver shortage. The average age of a truck driver today is 55 years old, and it's a male. And there's only about 6% of the workforce are women, and those numbers are not being replaced. So the driver shortage could be helped out by autonomous, but on the other hand, drivers are saying, are we about to lose work because we're going to be replaced by technology? And I don't believe so. I think there'll always be some type of human interaction that will be needed. Even platooning, the idea of platooning is talking about maybe these trucks go from exit to exit, so they're strictly highway, and then the local drivers would pick up those trailers and bring them to their respective areas. So there's definitely a driver shortage, but I don't see the autonomous putting drivers out of work. There could also be these mixed convoys where we have drivers as well as autonomous vehicles in cooperation together. So, and then platooning, as I said, according to the North American Council for Freight Efficiency, Carriers are hoping for a 7 to 9% savings in fuel costs. Industry experts are suggesting that it could be possibly more like 4 to 5, and that's based on infrastructure concerns and traffic congestion. So I think the potential is there, but realistically, the percentages are much lower. And autonomous platooning would allow trucks to follow at distances that could be unsafe for human operators. So right now, there's currently about 17 states that are allowing for platooning. Now, several other states have legislation proposed language, but that will have to be drafted to address jurisdictions that have laws about following too close. And when in Massachusetts, we have laws on the books that only allow a certain distance to safely operate. And this proposed legislation in many states will exempt platooning from these following too close laws. Now, while the legislative language in each jurisdiction is very similar, there's differences between the state descriptions that could cause issues as the technology advances. Now, industry partners are hoping to eliminate any patchwork legislation that would impede interstate commerce. So while each state produces their own legislation, the idea is that we really do not want to stop any of this commerce at the state lines, so that adjustments need to be made. So under federal publications, there was a Self-Drive Act that was passed by the House of Representatives in 2017. This bill fell very short of the mark as far as autonomous trucks go, because it excluded vehicles that were over 10,000 pounds. It also excluded any buses that carried more than 10 people. And the transportation of dangerous materials was also excluded. So there was a document produced by USDOT, and it talks about preparing for the future of transportation, and it's Automated Vehicles 3.0. And it's created 6 principles, and I'll go through these quickly because I find that these are important because it gives us a commitment from USDOT that wasn't there before. And they're talking about prioritizing safety. And this is basically, they're going to lead the efforts on to address potential safety risks and then advance the life-saving potential of automation. And I think that's important because, as I've said in the past, usually the technology far outadvances any type of regulation until the technology's quite a ways down the road. So this is actually good that the USDOT is stepping up to the plate and saying that they are taking the lead role on making sure that this is safe technology. And they want to remain technology neutral, where they want to promote the competition and the innovation to achieve that mobility and the economic goal. And they want to modernize regulations so that USDOT will modernize or eliminate outdated regulations. Anyone who's worked to change federal regulations realizes that that's a monumental task. So I'm quite anxious to work with USDOT on some of these to see if we can remove some of those outdated regulations. And then to encourage a consistent regulatory surrounding for automated vehicles. Like I said, because it can create confusion and introduce barriers and present challenges. So that I'm hoping for. And they're going to provide some guidance and best practices, and then to protect and enhance the freedoms for all Americans. So when people think that, you know, autonomous is going to take over and everything will be run by robots, I don't see that happening, because we've always had this love of the open road in our vehicles, and I think that you're always going to see somebody out there on the weekend driving their Edsel, and and this will be a gradual change. It's going to take some time for manufacturers to produce these vehicles. So there are always going to be traditional vehicles on the road. I just think that we look forward to this as an opportunity to create safer roads by eliminating those human errors that are causing collisions, and allowing people with mobility issues to get out and get over those challenges. So I look forward to, as somebody whose mobility gets challenged the older I get, I'm quite excited for it. But again, we need to make sure that the technology advances while being safe for the public. So, and I'd like to take any questions or conversations that anyone has.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Bob. While people are thinking about their questions, I have one.
Sure.
I don't know a lot about autonomous vehicles, so this is really helpful for me in giving me some of the basics. And I'm curious about platooning. So you said that platooning was occurring or allowable in 17 states, and that one of the issues in other states is how to address following too closely. Is there a way that law enforcement can tell if trucks are driving too closely with drivers, or if they're platooning and therefore it's acceptable? Is there some way for them to see that?
Well, I think when I read some of the proposed legislation by the other states is that the platooning, if a carrier was using a platoon, law enforcement would need to be notified ahead of time, so that there would be an interaction plan. One of the big functions that we've looked at with the AAMVA working group is that there needs to be an interaction plan with law enforcement and first responders, so that in the event of any type of collision or problem, that we would know right off the bat whether these vehicles are engaged in autonomous operation or if they're disengaged, and then any information pertaining to the vehicles needs to be available to the first responders. So that, as far as that platooning, I think right now police, I'm not sure how they judge, but the following too close laws, I believe there's like 50 or 60 feet is or 2 car lengths is the acceptable distance. So, and the funny thing about platooning is the technology first was discussed, a lot of states didn't want it, and now they're seeing that the cost benefits could be worthwhile. So now a lot of states are promoting it. And one interesting thing is Daimler, which has been doing an incredible amount of work in the autonomous field, recently announced in January at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas that they're disbanding their platooning research, that they don't want to be part of it anymore. And the reason that they're saying that is that they think realistically the 4 to 7% savings that they could see would be lost once these vehicles are separated from the platoon to go on to their respective destinations. So Daimler, which was a leader in the research, has now backed out of that.
Interesting. I'm curious too about the interaction plan. That makes a lot of sense, and an excellent role for AAMVA in terms of thinking about that interaction plan with law enforcement. Are there potential technological ways for law enforcement to be able to know if a vehicle is platooning or in an autonomous mode? Could they get some kind of technical message?
Well, there's what we've done here in Mass is that we have a couple of companies that have tested here, and one thing that we do is that there needs to be an interaction plan that's submitted for us to review. So one of the things for law enforcement is these plans need to be in place prior to the activity so that they understand, if these vehicles are in autonomous mode or if they're going to be disengaged. Obviously, if the vehicle is in autonomous mode and there's an issue, we need to know how to stop it, how to disengage it before there were any further, situations. There was recently a story in the paper where an autonomous vehicle was testing, and the operator in the vehicle was passed out and was inebriated. And the police, what they did was they figured a way to get in front of it, and it brought the vehicle to a complete stop. So, and there's a lot of issues because, who gets the citation? Does the operator who's really, if it's in autonomous mode, he's not operating, does he get the citation? But the platooning part is interesting to me because, like I said, Daimler was the first one to come out and say that they're not interested in it anymore. And then there's also, you know, I recently read an article where there need to be concerns about the airflow to the vehicle itself. So if there's an air drag between the vehicle in front of them, is it allowing the airflow to, you know, for the vehicle to handle it? So it's a topic that's going to get tossed around for quite a while.
Mm. What do folks think? I can see that we have law enforcement on the call, excuse me, and that we have policy folks and driver's licensing folks. What do people think about the implications of autonomous vehicles for the commercial motor vehicle world? You can type a question or a comment in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question or make a comment.
I mean, I think a lot of people, you know, the autonomous vehicles that are operating on campuses and large areas they're these small shuttles. There's not a lot of concern because they're low speed and you know, they're just staying within a loop or a designated area. But commercial vehicles are very different, and you know, we're talking some size and weight, and safety is paramount. So obviously, before there's any type of release for this, there needs to be an incredible amount of testing, and to have that, you know, public acceptance is very important.
Yeah. We have a comment. My concern, the comment says, my concern is with the remote operator. Why wouldn't they have to have a CDL with the proper endorsements?
Well, it's not that they don't. That this is being discussed right now, and there are factions of people that are saying if they are not operating the vehicle, if the remote operator is operating from, you know, say an office and is controlling that vehicle electronically, are they required to have that license? So those are things that are, you know, the working group's talking about it, and it's interaction with all the jurisdictions and law enforcement as well. Because we need to understand, you know, is it necessary? Personally, I think it is. I mean, we definitely want somebody who's operating that vehicle to understand all the features of it. So again, a lot of these topics are being, we're right in the middle of it. So the discussions are going on today to understand what is necessary and what's not.
We have another comment, and I think you've started to address this one, but I'll ask it in case you want to add anything. The person says, I like your thoughts on remote operation. Several companies are planning to have remote operation as a means to control a truck, either as a fallback. Do they need a CDL? What are the group's thoughts or approaches to registering ADS-equipped vehicles?
As far as registering the equipment, we here in Massachusetts, we haven't done anything along those lines. I know that California and Nevada are talking about having, you know, specific license plates or markings on the vehicles that let people know that they're autonomous or that you know, they're in autonomous mode. As far as, and I think the first part of your question was remote operator.
Yes.
So the idea of a remote operator, personally, I have my concerns only because I understand that technology is not always 100%. So I mean, if somebody's, you know, there's an operation in California that uses a small shuttle and it's all controlled by somebody sitting in an office. Again, it's a low speed operation and it stays within a particular designated area, but technology is not always accurate, and there are some concerns. So those are things that we're looking at now, the pros and the cons.
Okay, we have another question. As a prosecutor, prosecutor. My concern was what Mr. Rowland identified, who is considered the operator when the collision occurs. Are the working groups also collaborating with prosecutors and with law enforcement to redefine operation, quote unquote, under the law, just as the group is taking a look at following too closely laws?
Yeah, so the ADS, or the automated driving systems, in a number of state legislations are being addressed as the operator. So there's a well-represented group of law enforcement that are on the working group, and these are being looked at right now. Again, the discussion revolves around who gets the citation, you know, like I said, an interaction plan if these vehicles need to be, you know, pulled over, to make sure, and also safety on the part of the first responders to make sure, you know, if they grab the handle of this door, is it going to take off, or is it disengaged? So these are things that are being discussed right now. There's been nothing set in stone, and I don't think it will be for some time until all options are reviewed. But no, as far as prosecutors, I don't believe that are involved, but I will definitely bring that up, and I think that's a great question. So I'll make that aware to the working group.
Excellent. Those working group discussions have to be fascinating.
You know, it's funny. I had been trying to get on this group since its inception, and when there was an opening, you know, I dove at it, and the conversations are just. We had a face-to-face in Kansas City last year, and it was just fascinating. And we're talking about 25 people from all motor vehicle agencies, law enforcement, the federal government, the highway safety, and just there was so many great topics that were brought up, things that I'm sure a lot of us never thought of, but you know, the seed was planted, and it really there's so many different aspects that do need to be looked at, and I can't help but think that this is similar to how people felt going from the horse to the Model T. So now it's like this completely technology, which is probably going to change transportation, and we're right at the front door of it, and there's a lot of things that we need to look at. So no, I welcome all comments and concerns, and those I take forward to the working group, and we get those on the table to talk about them.
That's great. We have another question. Which states currently allow platooning?
California, Nevada, the bigger states that are really, I don't have a list for you, but I could probably get that for you if you needed it. But it's more the bigger CDL states. And right now, actually, with only that many states that are allowing platooning, I read where that really equates to about 45,000 miles of available highway. So it's not a lot at this point. And platooning, you really are not going to see as much on the East Coast, where, you know, you've got much more open road out in the western part of the country.
Right. Do any of the participants have additional questions or comments? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or type in the chat box. Well, Bob, thank you so much. Really, really interesting topic and excellent presentation. As I said before, the presentation will be posted on the CV-STAC website in the next day or so. So if you know of folks that missed this webinar but are interested in hearing it, you can guide them to cvstac.umasssafe.org. Next week, our webinar will be on troops in trucks, and our speaker will be Greg Escobar, and he's with the Virginia DMV and their Veteran Services Program. They are doing in Virginia some really interesting work around troops in trucks, and he will talk about all the ins and outs of how that was developed and what kinds of policies and legislation needed to be changed and how it's working and what kind of lessons they've learned in their implementation process. So thanks everybody for interesting dialogue, and I hope to see you next week. Thanks again, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. I appreciate it. Thanks to Benjamin and Jen. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.